Opening hook for YouTube video. What if a single act of kindness, an act that cost you the last $20 to your name, was actually an audition? Not for a job, but for a new life. For Amelia Rossi, a 26-year-old waitress drowning in debt and family medical bills, helping a forgotten old man, was just the right thing to do. She never imagined he was the missing father of Sebastian Sterling, one of New York's most ruthless billionaires. She thought her good deed was the end of the story. She was wrong. It was only the beginning, and the limousine that came for her wasn't a reward. It was a summons to a test that would threaten to destroy her very soul. Part 1. The cold November rain. The rain didn't just fall, it assaulted the city. It hammered against the panoramic windows of the Daily Grind diner, each drop a tiny fist beating against the fragile warmth inside. For Amelia Leah Rossi, the rhythmic drumming was the soundtrack to her exhaustion. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, the time of night when the city's energy sagged, leaving behind a residue of damp, weary souls, seeking refuge in cheap coffee and lukewarm pie. Leah moved through the diner with an economy of motion born from 6 years of practice. Her apron, once a cheerful cherry red, was now a faded blush, stained with the ghosts of 1,000 splatters of grease and coffee. At 26, her dreams of being a fashion designer, of seeing her own Amelia Rossi originals tag on something other than a pincushion in her cramped Queen's apartment, felt as distant as the sun. Reality was a mountain of debt, a second-hand sewing machine that jammed more than it stitched, and the ever-present gnawing anxiety for her younger sister Chloe. Chloe was the sun to Leah's weary moon. At 16, she should have been worried about prom dates and algebra tests. Instead, she was a veteran of hospital wings, battling a rare autoimmune disorder that required treatments with price tags that looked more like zip codes. Every dollar Leah earned, every extra shift she picked up, went into the Chloe Fund, an envelope of cash hidden in a shoebox that never seemed to get full enough. Rossi Table 4 is a swamp. "Mop it up," barked Brenda, the diner's manager. Brenda was a woman who seemed perpetually pickled in vinegar, her face set in a permanent scowl. "And Tiffany is complaining you're hogging the good tables again." Leah glanced at Tiffany, who was buffing her nails behind the counter, a smirk playing on her lips. Tiffany treated her job as a temporary inconvenience, a place to pass time between auditions for reality shows she'd never get on. "It's the only table I've had in an hour, Brenda." Leah said, her voice low. "And he just ordered coffee." "Then you should have upsold him on the pie," Brenda snapped, turning her attention to the cash register. "Honestly, it's like I have to teach you children everything." Leah bit back a retort and grabbed the rag. The man at table 4 was a regular of sorts, a quiet man who nursed a single coffee for hours, always leaving a meticulously folded dollar bill as a tip. He was harmless. But tonight, the rhythmic drumming of the rain was broken by a new sound, the creak of the front door letting in a gust of wind that smelled of wet pavement and misery. An old man stood shivering in the doorway, water pooling around his worn-out shoes. He was thin, almost skeletal, with a tangle of white hair plastered to his scalp, his coat a threadbare tweed that might have been handsome 50 years ago was soaked through. His eyes, a startlingly pale blue, darted around the diner, filled with a disoriented confusion that tugged at something deep inside Leah. "Sorry, Pop. We're not a shelter," Brenda called out without looking up. "You want to eat, you gotta pay." Tiffany snickered. "He probably smells. Tell him to leave Leah." The old man flinched his shoulders, hunching as if to ward off a blow. He fumbled in his pockets, his fingers stiff with cold. I just wanted a cup of tea, he whispered, his voice raspy. It's so cold. Something in Leah's chest cracked. She saw not just a homeless man, but the ghost of her own grandfather in his final years, proud, confused, and fading. She saw the vulnerability she feared for Chloe, for herself, if one more thing in their fragile world went wrong. She walked over to him deliberately, ignoring Brenda's glare. "Of course, sir. Right this way. Let's get you out of that wet coat." She led him to a small booth in the back, away from the prying eyes of the other patrons. She helped him out of the sodden coat, her hands brushing against the fabric. It was surprisingly fine wool, worn thin, but clearly of high quality. She hung it on a hook to dry, and returned to the table. "A hot cup of tea coming right up," she said, her smile gentle. "Anything else? Some soup, maybe?" "It's on me." The man looked up, his pale blue eyes focusing on her for the first time. The confusion seemed to recede, replaced by a flicker of sharp intelligence. That's very kind of you. But I can't." "Don't you worry about it," Leah insisted. "Everyone deserves to be warm on a night like this." She went to the kitchen and placed the order. Not just tea, but a large bowl of the thick chicken noodle soup that was the only genuinely good thing on the menu, and a side of buttered bread. "What do you think you're doing?" Brenda hissed, cornering her by the service window. "I run a business, not a charity. That's coming out of your pay, Rossi." "Fine," Leah said, her jaw tight. "And your tips." Brenda added a cruel glint in her eyes. "Since you're so flush with cash, you can afford to feed every stray that wanders in." Leah's stomach clenched. Her tips for the night amounted to maybe $40. It was gas money. It was part of Chloe's prescription copay. But when she returned to the booth with the steaming tray, the look of profound gratitude on the old man's face made the knot in her stomach loosen just a little. He ate slowly, methodically, his hands trembling slightly. Leah found herself lingering, refilling his tea, asking him about his day. He was quiet, his answers vague. He said his name was Arthur. He talked about the city, but not the New York of today. He spoke of trolley cars and automats, of a time when the Empire State Building was the new kid on the block. He seemed lost, not just in the city, but in time itself. As he spoke, Leah noticed his watch. It was an old Patek Philippe, the leather strap cracked and frayed, but the gold casing unmistakable. It was an heirloom, a piece of quiet luxury that was completely at odds with his destitute appearance. A shiver of unease went through her. Who was this man? When he had finished every last drop of soup, a sense of clarity seemed to return to him. The disorientation was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "Thank you, my dear," he said, his voice stronger now. "You have a kindness in you that is rare, like a perfect, uncut diamond." Leah blushed. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," he said, his gaze firm. "You did what you would do. There is a difference." He tried to stand, but swayed on his feet. I think I need to get home, but I'm not quite sure." Leah's heart ached. She couldn't just send him back out into that storm. Brenda would have a fit, but she didn't care anymore. "Where do you live, Arthur? I can call you a cab." He mumbled an address on the Upper East Side, a prestigious street that made Leah's eyebrows shoot up. It made no sense. She walked to the front, pulling her phone out. A cab to that address on a rainy night would be at least $30. She looked in her wallet. A crumpled 20, a 5 and 3 singles. $28. Her entire net worth until her next paycheck. The Chloe Fund shoebox flashed in her mind. Brenda. I'm calling him a cab. She stated her voice, leaving no room for argument. Brenda just laughed, a harsh, grating sound. On what? Your good looks. Don't use the diner's phone. Gritting her teeth, Leah used her own app. The fare was estimated at $32. She didn't have it. She took a deep breath, walked back to the man, and crouched by his side. Arthur, do you have anyone I can call? A family member? A friend? He looked down at his hands, a look of immense shame on his face. My son, Sebastian. He gets so busy. I don't like to be a bother. I'm sure he'd want to know you're safe. Leah prompted gently. Arthur shook his head. No. No calls. Leah made a decision. It was reckless. It was stupid. It was the only thing she could do. She took the 20 and the 5 from her wallet and slipped them into the pocket of his old tweed coat. Here, she whispered. Take a cab, please. I'll walk you out and tell the driver where to go. He looked at her, his blue eyes swimming with unshed tears. He didn't say a word, just gave a slow, solemn nod. Leah helped him to the door, shielding him from the renewed blast of wind. She flagged down the first cab that came by a yellow chariot in the stormy night. She gave the driver the address and the $25. This should cover most of it, she told the driver. He'll have the rest. Please make sure he gets inside safely. The driver, a burly man with a kind face, nodded. Got it, lady. As the cab pulled away, its red tail lights disappearing into the curtain of rain, Leah stood shivering on the sidewalk. She was cold, she was broke, and she was almost certainly going to be fired in the morning. A profound sense of despair washed over her. She wrapped her arms around herself, the thin fabric of her uniform, doing nothing to ward off the chill that had settled deep in her bones. She had tried to do good, but all she felt was the bitter, lonely cold. Back inside, Brenda was waiting, her arms crossed. That was your last paycheck you just put in that cab, Rossi. I hope it was worth it. Clock out, and don't bother coming in tomorrow. The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. Just like that. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. She numbly walked to the back, grabbed her worn peacoat and her bag, avoiding the triumphant gaze of Tiffany. As she walked out of the daily grind for the last time, the rain felt less like an assault and more like a lament, weeping for a world that punished kindness and rewarded cruelty. She had no job, no money, and a sick sister who depended on her. The diamond Arthur had spoken of felt like a lead weight in her chest. Part 2. The Sterling Tower. The next morning, the city was scrubbed clean, the sky a fragile, cloudless blue. But the brightness felt like a mockery to Leah. She sat at her small kitchen table, a stack of unpaid bills on one side and her sketchbook on the other. For the first time in her life, the sketchbook offered no comfort. The blank pages seemed to stare back at her, judging her failure. How was she going to tell Chloe? How was she going to afford the new medication Dr. Evans had said was critical? The $25 she had given away felt like $1 million now. A single stupid act of compassion had potentially derailed their entire lives. She had gambled on kindness and lost spectacularly. Her phone buzzed, and she flinched, expecting a gloating text from Tiffany or a final venomous email from Brenda. The number was blocked. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. On the fourth buzz, annoyed, she answered, ready to snap at a telemarketer. "Is this Amelia Rossi?" The voice was female, crisp, and so professionally polished it seemed to have been ironed. "Who is this?" Leah asked, her own voice rough with unshed tears. "My name is Evelyn Reed. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Sebastian Sterling. I am calling on behalf of Mr. Arthur Sterling." Leah's blood ran cold. Arthur. Sebastian. The names the old man had whispered. Oh God, what if he hadn't gotten home? What if something had happened to him? "Is he okay?" Leah asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He is fine, thanks to you," Evelyn, Reed said. The tone was clipped, offering no warmth. "Mr. Sebastian Sterling would like to speak with you. He has sent a car. It will be arriving at your address in 15 minutes. "A car? I don't understand." "You can just put him on the phone. Mr. Sterling does not conduct his business over the phone." 15 minutes, Ms. Rossi." The line went dead. Leah stared at her phone, her mind reeling. A car, Sebastian Sterling. She quickly Googled the name. The results made her dizzy. Sebastian Sterling wasn't just a rich man's son. He was the CEO of Sterling Whitmore Enterprises, a global real estate and investment behemoth. He was a titan of industry, a figure from the glossy pages of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. His face, chiseled and severe, with intense dark eyes, stared back at her from the screen. He was dubbed the Wolf of Wall Street's gilded cage, known for his ruthless business acumen and his obsessive privacy. And Arthur Sterling, he was Sebastian's father. The founder, the legend, the man who had started it all with a single property deal 5 decades ago and built an empire. A man so reclusive he hadn't been photographed in public for 20 years. The man to whom she had given her last $25 for a cab ride. Panic seized her. What did a man like Sebastian Sterling want with her? To thank her, or to accuse her of something? Maybe they thought she was a grifter, trying to take advantage of a vulnerable old man. The thought was nauseating. She looked down at her frayed leggings and faded college sweatshirt. She had nothing to wear. Rushing to her closet, she pulled out her one interview outfit, a simple black sheath dress she'd made herself, and a pair of sensible heels. It was plain, but it was professional. She threw her hair into a neat bun, applied a touch of mascara to hide the sleepless night in her eyes, and took a deep breath. Whatever this was, she would face it with her head held high. Exactly 15 minutes later, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Ghost glided to a stop in front of her modest apartment building. It was so silent it seemed to absorb sound from the street. The driver, a man in a black suit and sunglasses, got out and opened the rear door for her, without a word. The interior smelled of rich leather and quiet power. It was a world away from the stale coffee and grease of the daily grind. The drive into Manhattan was a blur. The car didn't just drive. It flowed through traffic, parting it like a ship through water. They pulled up in front of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the sky itself. The Sterling Tower. Polished granite and smoked glass rose in an imposing declaration of wealth and influence. Evelyn Reed was waiting for her in the lobby. She was exactly as her voice had suggested, tall, impossibly chic, in a tailored grey suit with an aura of intimidating efficiency. "Miss Rossi." Thank you for coming. Follow me. They bypassed the main security desk and went to a private elevator. Evelyn used a keycard, and the elevator shot upwards with a silent, gut-wrenching velocity. The doors opened directly into an office. It was less an office and more a kingdom. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window, offering a godlike view of Central Park. The furniture was minimalist and modern, each piece a work of art. And behind a massive desk made of a single slab of dark, polished wood stood Sebastian Sterling. He was even more formidable in person. Tall and lean, in a suit so perfectly tailored it seemed molded to him. His dark eyes the same intense shade as in the photos swept over her, and Leah felt as though she were being X-rayed, catalogued and dismissed in a single glance. "Miss Rossi," he said. His voice was a low baritone devoid of any emotion. "Thank you for joining us." He gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than her car. "Please, sit." Leah sat her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Evelyn Reed remained standing, a silent sentinel by the door. "My father returned home last night in a taxi you paid for." Sebastian began getting straight to the point. He slid a crisp $20 bill and a $5 bill across the vast expanse of the desk. "Your reimbursement?" "That's not necessary," Leah stammered. "I assure you it is," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We do not accept charity. Now I have a few questions for you." His gaze was piercing. "You work at the Daily Grind on Lexington. Your manager is Brenda Petrov. You were terminated from your position last night." "Correct." Leah's stomach tightened. He'd already investigated her. "Yes." "And you have a sister, Chloe Rossi, currently under the care of Dr. Ananya Evans at St. Jude's for a chronic autoimmune condition. Her medical bills are substantial." A cold dread washed over Leah. This wasn't a thank you. This was an interrogation. He thought she was a predator. "What I did for your father had nothing to do with any of that," she said, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "He was cold and lost. I helped him. That's all." Sebastian leaned forward, his hands steepling on the desk. "My father is a very wealthy man, Ms. Rossi. He is also unwell. He has early-stage vascular dementia. He has good days and bad days. Sometimes he gets confused. He wanders. He thinks he's a young man again, trying to make his way in the city. He gets lost in the past." The coldness in his demeanor suddenly made a different kind of sense. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a shield, a defense mechanism forged by fear and the stress of watching a loved one fade away. When he left here yesterday, he was wearing a Patek Philippe Calatrava watch worth approximately $50,000. Sebastian continued his eyes, never leaving hers. He returned home without it. Leah's breath caught in her throat. The watch. The beautiful old watch. She hadn't even thought about it. Had it been stolen? Had he lost it? I didn't see it. She lied, the words tasting like ash. A primal self-preservation instinct screamed at her. If she admitted to seeing it, he would be certain she had something to do with its disappearance. Her act of kindness, her sacrifice, would be twisted into a crime. Sebastian Sterling watched her, his expression unreadable. For a long, silent moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city far below. He seemed to be weighing her, judging the truth of her words against the data he had collected. Then a door to the side of the office opened, and Arthur Sterling walked in. He was transformed. Gone were the threadbare coat and the disheveled hair. He was dressed in a soft cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. He looked healthy, rested, and his pale blue eyes were sharp and clear. He held his Patek Philippe watch in his hand. He walked over to Leah, his steps sure and steady. He smiled a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I believe this belongs to you, Arthur," said his voice gentle. He held out the watch. Leah stared at him, utterly bewildered. "Me." "That's yours." "No," Arthur said, his smile widening. "I don't think so. Sebastian, do you have it?" Sebastian reached into a desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet-wrapped object. He unwrapped it. It was a sewing needle, rusted and bent, tucked into a tiny piece of felt. Arthur took it and held it up. "My father was a tailor. When I was a boy, he gave me his last needle. He told me, this needle can turn rags into riches, but its true purpose is to mend what is torn. I kept it my whole life, a reminder of where I came from." He looked at Leah, his eyes full of a profound understanding. "Last night, when you helped me out of my coat, you were so gentle. You weren't disgusted by my appearance. You just cared. And as you hung it up, this little needle fell out of a hole in the lining. You picked it up without a second thought and tucked it back into the pocket as if you were mending a small tear in the world." Leah remembered. It had been such a small, unconscious gesture. Seeing the needle on the floor, she'd simply picked it up and put it back in his pocket for safekeeping. And later Arthur continued, his voice thick with emotion. "When I was in the cab, I found the money you'd put in my other pocket. But I also found this." He pointed to the watch in his other hand. "I had taken it off because the strap was irritating my wrist. I'd forgotten it was there. You could have taken it, my dear. No one would have known. You could have paid your sister's medical bills for a year. But you didn't. You gave me your last dollar, and you saved my father's last needle." He turned to his son, whose stern facade had finally cracked, revealing a flicker of stunned admiration. "You see," Sebastian Arthur said softly, "I told you. She's the real thing. An uncut diamond." Sebastian Sterling slowly rose from his chair. He walked around the desk and stood before Leah. The intimidating aura was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "Miss Rossi." "Amelia," he said, his voice softer than she thought possible. "My father's test was unorthodox. My apologies. We live in a world of sharks. It is rare to find someone who acts not for gain, but from simple, unadorned decency. We wanted to be sure." Leah was speechless, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Relief, anger, confusion, and a strange, dizzying sense of vindication. "The reimbursement stands," Sebastian said, gesturing to the cash on his desk. "But that is not why I brought you here. My father and I would like to make you a proposition. A thank you is not enough. We want to offer you a contract that will change your life." Part 3. The Gilded Cage. The word contract hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. Leah's mind, conditioned by years of scarcity, immediately went to a simple transaction. A check, a cash reward, a tidy sum that would solve her problems and send her on her way. It would be the fairy tale ending. The good deed paid in full. What Sebastian Sterling proposed was something else entirely. It was bigger, more complex, and infinitely more terrifying. My father is officially retired, but his legacy is philanthropy, Sebastian explained, pacing slowly before the panoramic window. The Sterling Foundation has donated billions to hospitals, universities, and museums. But my father has always felt we've become disconnected from the ground level. We write checks, we attend galas, but we don't mend what is torn, as he would say. Arthur, who had settled into a plush armchair, nodded in agreement. We build towers of glass and steel, but we've forgotten the foundations. The people. Sebastian stopped pacing and turned to face Leah directly. His dark eyes were alight with a new intensity. My father was deeply moved by your character, Amelia, by your instinctive kindness and your integrity. He believes, and I am beginning to agree, that you are exactly what the Foundation has been missing. A conscience. Leah's head was spinning. I don't understand. What are you asking? We are establishing a new independent initiative within the Foundation, Sebastian said. The Sterling Community Arts and Design Initiative. Its mission will be to identify and fund grassroots projects, community gardens, workshops for aspiring artists in low-income neighborhoods, scholarships for design students who can't afford tuition. We don't want to just give money. We want to provide resources, mentorship, and a platform. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We want you to run it. Leah felt the air leave her lungs. Her in charge of a foundation. Her who had been fired from a diner job less than 24 hours ago. It was absurd. Me. I don't have any experience. I just have a sketchbook full of dresses and a certificate from a 2-year community college program. You have more than that, Arthur interjected gently from his chair. You have empathy. You have an eye for what is genuine. You didn't see a bum in a diner. You saw a person in need. You didn't see a rusty needle. You saw something worth saving. That is a skill no university can teach. Sebastian slid a thick leather-bound portfolio across the desk. This is the contract. Your title would be Executive Director. The starting salary is $300,000 a year. Leah's vision swam. $300,000. The number was so vast, so astronomical, it didn't seem real. It was more than she would have made in a decade at the diner. It was Chloe's treatments paid in full. It was a new apartment, a life free from the suffocating weight of debt. It was everything she had ever prayed for. The position also comes with a corporate apartment at the Sterling Residence's full health coverage for you and your immediate family, and a discretionary budget of $5 million for the first year of the initiative. Sebastian added his voice even. It was too much. It was a dream from which she would surely wake. Her hand trembled as she reached for the portfolio. She opened it. The legal jargon was dense and intimidating, but the numbers were there, typed in stark, beautiful black ink. Her name was there, Amelia Rossi. This was real. She looked up at the two men, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Why? Why me? There are thousands of people more qualified. But are they more worthy? Sebastian countered, his gaze unwavering. We're not hiring a resume, Amelia. We're investing in a person. We tested you. You passed. My father is a brilliant judge of character. I've learned never to doubt his instincts. A giddy, overwhelming wave of joy washed over her. It was happening. Her life was changing right here in this sky-high office. She was ready to sign. She would have signed her name in blood if they'd asked. And then Sebastian Sterling added the final detail. The twist of the knife, disguised as an opportunity. "Your first project, your flagship initiative is already selected," he said, a strange, almost challenging light in his eyes. "It will be the anchor for everything that comes after. We need it to be a massive success." He walked over to the window and pointed down, not towards the sprawling green of Central Park, but eastward towards the blocky, less glamorous rooftops of Midtown East. "We recently acquired a controlling interest in a parcel of land on Lexington Avenue," he said. "Block 3B. It's a prime piece of real estate, underdeveloped and underperforming. We are going to demolish the existing structures and build a new multi-use community arts center. State-of-the-art galleries, subsidized studio spaces for young designers, a performance hall, a rooftop garden. It will be the crown jewel of the new initiative. And you, Amelia, will oversee the entire project, from the design to the groundbreaking. Block 3B on Lexington." The address hit her like a punch to the gut. She knew that block. She knew its cracked sidewalks, its struggling businesses, its smells and sounds. It was the block where the daily grind stood. Her blood turned to ice. Demolish. The existing structures, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Of course," Sebastian said dismissively. "They're ancient, not up to code. A dry cleaner, a failing bookstore, a bodega, and your former place of employment. They're insignificant. The owners have been bought out. The tenants will be evicted. It's a standard redevelopment procedure. Insignificant." The word echoed in the silent, opulent room. He was talking about people's lives. The Korean family who ran the dry cleaner, who always gave her a discount. Old Mr. Henderson, who ran the bookstore and let her read for hours without buying anything. And Brenda and Tiffany. As much as she despised them, the diner was their livelihood. He was talking about wiping away their world with the stroke of a pen. The giddy joy curdled into a cold, sickening horror. This wasn't a reward. This was a test. A much crueler, more complex test than the one with the watch. Sebastian was watching her, his expression a mask of cool neutrality, but she could see it in his eyes. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was giving her everything she'd ever wanted, but the price was the very soul he claimed to be hiring. The first act of her new life as a compassionate philanthropist would be to destroy the world of the little people she had just left behind. She looked from Sebastian's challenging gaze to Arthur's placid one. Was the old man in on this too? Was his gentle wisdom just another part of the elaborate charade? "You'd be giving them something better in its place," Sebastian said smoothly, as if reading her thoughts. "Progress requires sacrifice, Amelia. You can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. Are you going to let sentimentality for a greasy spoon diner stand in the way of a multi-million-dollar project that could help thousands?" The choice was laid bare before her, stark and brutal. On one side, Chloe's health, a life of security and purpose, the chance to pursue her design dreams on a scale she could never have imagined, everything she wanted. On the other side, her principles, the memory of the desperation she felt just this morning, the knowledge that she would be committing the exact same sin of callous indifference that she had despised in Brenda and Tiffany, but on a scale that was infinitely more devastating. She could see it so clearly. She would sign the contract, and the first eviction notice would be served to Brenda. Leah Rossi, the waitress who gave a homeless man her last $25, would become the woman who put her former colleagues out on the street. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, she felt like she was choking on it. This was the gilded cage. They had opened the door for her, shown her the golden perch and the diamond-encrusted water bowl. But the price of entry was to forget how to fly. The price was to become one of them. Her hand, which had been reaching for the pen, fell back into her lap. She looked at the contract at her name, at the life it promised. Then she looked out the window down at the city full of people whose lives were considered insignificant in the grand calculus of power and progress. I need some time to think, she said, her voice trembling. A flicker of disappointment, or was it triumph, crossed Sebastian's face. Of course, the offer is on the table. But real estate, like time, Miss Rosie, doesn't wait for anyone. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead. The magnificent office suddenly felt like a prison, its luxury a suffocating blanket. She had walked in here a victim, a girl who had been wronged but had done right. Now they were offering her the chance to be a victor, but she would have to be the one to do the wronging. As Evelyn Reed escorted her back to the silent elevator, Leah clutched the heavy portfolio to her chest. It felt less like a life-changing contract and more like a deal with the devil. And she had no idea how to escape it without losing a part of herself. Part 4. The Architect of Kindness. Part 4. The Architect of Kindness. Leah didn't go home. The silent, opulent Rolls-Royce, which had once felt like a vessel to a new reality, now felt like a cage on wheels, its rich leather scent suffocating her. She asked the driver, a man whose face she couldn't see behind his sunglasses, to drop her off 5 blocks from her apartment. The click of the door closing behind her sounded like a cell door locking. She needed to walk. She needed the hard, unforgiving New York pavement under her heels to remind her of what was real, of where she had just come from. The portfolio in her hands felt impossibly heavy, not with paper, but with the sheer moral gravity of the choice it contained. She walked for hours, her path a frantic, aimless scribble across the city map. She found herself watching a street musician, playing a saxophone, with more soul than skill, his open case, holding only a few coins. She saw a mother trying to soothe a crying baby on a crowded bus stop bench. She saw delivery drivers rushing, their faces etched with weariness. These were the people Sebastian Sterling would call insignificant eggs, the necessary casualties of his grand omelette. But their lives felt immensely, profoundly significant to Leah. They were her people. She was one of them. Eventually, her wandering led her to Central Park. She sank onto a cold bench overlooking the Volman rink, the cheerful music and graceful gliding of the skaters, a world away from the storm in her soul. Each of her thoughts was a violent collision. Chloe's health secured forever. The diner bulldozed. A new life of purpose. Eviction notices with her name at the bottom. The phrases crashed into each other, a multi-car pile-up of desire and duty, hope and horror. Sebastian Sterling's words echoed in her mind, smooth and logical and utterly monstrous. Progress requires sacrifice. It was the logic of tyrants and titans, the grand justification for every paved-over paradise, for every community dismantled in the name of a brighter future that its residents would never see. Was he right? Was she being hopelessly naive, a child clinging to sentimentality in a world run by pragmatists? This was her one and only chance to escape the crushing gravity of her circumstances. Was she truly going to let it go out of some misplaced loyalty to Brenda, a woman who had fired her without a second thought, and Tiffany, who had mocked her at every opportunity? But she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that it wasn't about loyalty to them. It was about loyalty to the person she had been just yesterday. The person who believed with every fiber of her being that no one was insignificant. If she signed that contract as it stood, she would be proving Sebastian Sterling's cynical worldview correct, that everyone has a price, that kindness is a luxury the desperate cannot afford, and that when offered enough power, anyone will eagerly abandon their principles. She would become the very thing she despised. She couldn't do it. The thought of facing the family from the dry cleaners, of seeing Mr. Henderson pack up his beloved books, was a physical sickness in her stomach. But she couldn't walk away either. The image of Chloe's pale face, the memory of Dr. Evans' grave voice discussing the next astronomically expensive treatment that was a different kind of sickness. She was trapped between betraying her soul and abandoning her sister. Just as despair threatened to swallow her whole, Arthur's words came back to her, cutting through the noise, not like a command, but like a question, a design prompt. The needle's true purpose is to mend what is torn. You don't mend something by destroying it. You don't heal a community by tearing its heart out and performing a transplant. The idea struck her with the force of a physical blow. Sebastian saw a plot of land to be cleared. She, a designer, saw a fabric to be rewoven. An idea fragile and audacious and utterly terrifying began to form in her mind. It was an impossible long shot. It required her to be more than just the grateful recipient of their life-altering offer. It required her to be a partner. It required her to be what she had always dreamed of being, a designer. For the next 48 hours, Leah's world shrank to the size of her small kitchen table. She didn't sleep. She subsisted on pot after pot of cheap, bitter coffee, the same kind she used to serve. But this time, it was fuel for a manic, desperate creation. She pushed the stack of red-stamped bills and the gnawing anxieties to the corner of the table and unrolled sheets of drawing paper. She spread out her sketchbook, and for the first time in months, the blank pages didn't mock her with their emptiness. They invited her, challenged her. She didn't just sketch dresses. She sketched a world. Using her old, slow laptop, she dove into a rabbit hole of research zoning laws, community-integrated architecture, LEED certifications, urban renewal projects that had successfully incorporated existing small businesses. She drew on her 6 years of experience at the diner, not as a waitress, but as an anthropologist. She knew the rhythms of that block, with an intimacy no market research could capture. She knew Mr. Henderson's bookstore needed more natural light and a space for poetry readings. She knew the bodega was a crucial social hub for the neighborhood's elderly residents, their main source of groceries and gossip. She knew the daily grind, for all its flaws, was a place of connection where lonely people could feel a little less alone. Her pencil, a simple tool against a billion-dollar problem, flew across the paper. Her identity as a fashion designer bled into a new one, a designer of spaces, of systems, of solutions. She didn't just reject Sebastian Sterling's project. She redesigned it from the ground up. In her vision, the gleaming Sterling Community Arts and Design Center was still the crown jewel. But it wasn't an impenetrable fortress of culture dropped into their world. It was a permeable, welcoming structure that grew out of the community itself. On its ground floor, woven into its very fabric, were new, revitalized spaces for the existing businesses. She designed a modern, bright and efficient new diner, keeping the old name with a small, elegant brass plaque by the door, The Daily Grind, Essen 1978. She designed a sun-drenched 2-level bookstore that spilled into a cafe for Mr. Henderson, with cozy reading nooks and space for local author events. She designed a modern, accessible grocery and market for the family that ran the bodega with subsidized rent to ensure they could thrive. She wasn't just saving them. She was integrating them, making them part of the new story. She was arguing with every line she drew and every calculation she made that progress didn't have to mean erasure, that a community's soul was as tangible and valuable an asset as its real estate. She worked out the numbers, creating new revenue streams, arguing that a beloved, thriving, and authentic community hub would make the entire project more valuable in the long run, not less. She put it all into a new portfolio, her own. It was a slim cardboard folder worlds away from their heavy leather-bound tome, but it was filled with her heart, her vision, and her quiet, unyielding defiance. On the third day, her eyes gritty from lack of sleep, but her spirit alight, she called Evelyn Reed. "I've made my decision," Leah said, her voice clear and steady, devoid of the tremor she felt in her heart. "I need a meeting with Mr. Sterling. Both of them." The silence on the other end was telling. Evelyn was likely unaccustomed to being given demands by diner waitresses, but her professionalism was absolute. "I will see what I can do." An hour later, the meeting was set. This time, when Leah walked into the office in the Sterling Tower, she wasn't trembling. She wore the same simple black dress, but she carried herself differently. Her shoulders back, her head held high. She wasn't the supplicant anymore. She was an architect. Sebastian and Arthur were waiting, their expressions unreadable. The leather-bound contract sat on the corner of the desk like a dormant predator. Ms. Rosie Sebastian began, his tone cool, clinical. "Have you come to a decision regarding our offer?" "I have," Leah said. She walked directly to the vast desk, placed her simple cardboard folder next to their opulent one, and opened it. She didn't wait for permission. She began her presentation. She walked them through her research, her logic, and her designs. She spoke with a passion and eloquence that surprised even herself, the words flowing from a place of deep conviction. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was an advocate, fighting for a world she believed in, for the value of the supposedly invaluable. She was mending what they intended to tear. Sebastian was silent throughout, his arms crossed tightly, a single muscle twitching in his jaw. He was a man accustomed to being the whitest, most powerful person in any room, and she was a 26-year-old from Queens, systematically dismantling his entire plan, challenging his entire worldview. When she finished, the silence in the room was immense, heavy with unspoken questions. Leah's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage, but she met his intense gaze without flinching. It was Arthur who broke the spell. He had been watching her not with surprise, but with a soft, knowing smile playing on his lips, as if he had been waiting for this all along. He rose slowly from his chair and walked over to the desk, his pale blue eyes poring over her sketches with genuine delight. Remarkable, he breathed, tracing the layout of the new integrated diner with a gentle finger. Absolutely remarkable. You didn't just say no, my dear. You created a better yes. He turned to his son, his eyes twinkling. Sebastian, look at this. This is what I meant by mending. This isn't sentimentality. This is vision. It's stronger, it's smarter, it's profoundly better business. Sebastian stared at the plans, then at Leah, then back at the plans. The cold, calculating mask of the CEO was gone, stripped away. In its place was a look of raw, undisguised astonishment. He had set a trap to see if she would become like him. He had never in his wildest calculations imagined she would have the audacity to try and make him become like her. "Your plan," he said, the businessman in him making one last desperate stand. It would cut into the projected profit margins of the Anchor project by at least 12% in the first 5 years. And it will increase community engagement, brand loyalty, and long-term asset value by 100%. Leah countered immediately, her voice ringing with confidence. "You'll build a legacy, Mr. Sterling, not just a building. Which asset do you think your father would value more?" Sebastian looked at his father, who was still smiling positively, beaming at Leah's drawings. For the first time, a slow, reluctant smile touched Sebastian's own lips. It transformed his face, erasing the harsh, severe lines and revealing the man he might have been beneath the armor of wealth and power. "The board will call me insane." He murmured the words laced with a strange new excitement. "Let them," Arthur said cheerfully, clapping his hands together softly. "It's been a long time since we did anything truly insane. It's about time we started again." Sebastian looked at Leah, and in his eyes she saw not just respect, but a deep and profound admiration. "You were right," he said, his voice softer now. "We weren't hiring a resume. We were looking for a conscience. It seems we found an architect as well." He walked decisively to the desk, picked up the thick leather-bound contract, the document that represented her gilded cage, and in a single cathartic motion tore it cleanly in half. The sound ripped through the quiet office, a sound of finality and new beginnings. Leah's heart stopped. Evelyn Sebastian called out, his voice energized. "Get the legal department up here, immediately. We need to draw up a new contract." He looked directly at Leah, his eyes locking with hers. "A partnership agreement." He gestured to her cardboard folder. "The salary and benefits remain, of course. But the project is now yours, Director Rossi. Your vision. We will build your better, yes." Leah stood there, speechless, as the 2 pieces of the old contract lay on the polished desk. She hadn't just accepted a new life. She had fought for it, redesigned it, and won it. On her own terms. Amelia Rossi's story isn't just about a waitress and a billionaire. It's a testament to the fact that true strength isn't about accepting the world as it is, but having the courage to redesign it. She was offered a golden cage, and instead chose to build a sanctuary, not just for herself, but for the very community she came from. Her contract wasn't just life-changing for her. It changed the definition of progress for an entire empire. It reminds us that your circumstances don't define your worth, and that the most powerful currency we have is our integrity. Sometimes the kindest act is also the most revolutionary. If this story moved you, please give it a like to show your support. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about the hidden heroes who change the world, one small, kind act at a time. What would you have done in her position? Let us know in the comments below.